Bond. James Bond.
Hello, everyone out there, and welcome to the very first live Shakin, Not Stirred, where tonight we will dive into the 5th James Bond movie, You Only Live Twice. But before we get into that, how you doing, Adam?
I am doing very well. The White Sox just won again another series after the All-Star break, so I'm in a decent mood at the moment.
One day we'll have to have you meet. He's hilarious, but a good friend of the show and a guy I met through talking movies is lives in Philadelphia, big Phillies fan. So it's funny to watch his posts about facing the White Sox and losing, and then ours when we're winning. It's great to see. But Sox been doing good lately, so that's a positive.
Break, yeah.
Have you? Besides watching the White Sox, have you watched anything recently?
I did watch Happy Gilmore 2.
Okay. So we could talk about that a second because I watched that too. And honestly, when I watched this movie, I actually thought of you because of your vast knowledge into movies. What did you think? How many stars out of 4?
Oh Lord, probably about 1.5, maybe 2. It is what it is. I didn't expect it to be more than what it was. So with what the story was, I'm glad they stuck a lot of cameos in there because it was always something kind of look forward to. Who's going to show up next? But
that's how I felt watching it the first time. I was about a 1.5, 2. I watched it by myself, and then I was like, you know what? I'll put this on and I'll show Katie. And then I liked it a little bit more. I think because maybe I didn't have the pressure of the expectation, and instead of just being like, okay, this is kind of ridiculous, but
it's like a lot of things, you don't think initially when you hear it's going to happen, you don't really think, do they really need to make this movie? Do you really, you know what I'm saying? It's like,
I just think it's a long time. Like if they were going to make it and he really wanted to make it, he probably would have made it within the first 5 years of the first one. You know what I mean? This is more like a greatest hits album, which is fine.
I kind of wish Christopher McDonald was actually a little more part of the third act than he was. Like I like the Shooter McGavin. I mean, everyone likes the Shooter McGavin character, but I was kind of hoping in the last match, in that last 20 minutes or so, he'd be kind of a bigger part of what happened. He had his moment, but then I was hoping to be a little bit more with him. But I mean, whatever. It was something. It's worth. Let's put it this way: it's not a good movie, but it's worth watching. It is worth watching.
Have you ever seen the Sofia Coppola movie, The Virgin Suicides?
Yeah.
I watched that one this week for the first time in a long time. Pretty good movie. I like the way the story is structured. It's very like weird too. You get like a weird vibe from it. Just thought it was a good movie to mention.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool. Josh Hartnett with a Trip Fontaine character. It's great.
That's why I love talking with you, because when's the last time you've seen that movie? While?
It's been a long time.
But you remember Trip Fontaine, the name from the movie. So kudos to you, because yes, that is his name.
Me and Mike Griffith, our fellow acquaintance, we used to always talk about his entrance in that movie with Magic Man playing in the background and stuff like that.
Yes.
It's just a great entrance for that character. So, but yeah, the movie itself was really cool. Sofia Coppola.
Music, some really good music in the movie too. Good music matched with scene. James Woods does a pretty good job too as a weird father. Kathleen Turner too. Interesting. And then right before I came on here, of Full Metal Jacket was on TV, and I was admiring the camera work at the and the war scene. I just thought Kubrick shot it pretty well.
Always does.
Always, for a while, I didn't feel that way because I always thought like Platoon looked more crisper. But now when you really watch it and more of the eyes of looking at the grittiness of it, it's pretty cool.
There's pretty much no one better than Kubrick of filming something from basically not from a point of view, but from, well, it's sort of a point of view from the characters themselves. You know, it's pretty phenomenal what he was able to do. I mean, he's my favorite director, so I'm always going to laud his efforts.
Well, it's Paramount on Showtime. They've been playing like that and Saving Private Ryan like back to back, so you get to see two different type of war movies from periods with two different directors. And speaking of Saving Private Ryan, just this past week we covered Jaws, Spielberg classic. You a Jaws fan?
I'm a big Jaws fan. Always been a Jaws fan. I've seen Jaws twice in the theater now since it's been released a couple times.
That's pretty
in the
awesome.
past couple of years. So it's nice actually seeing it on the big screen. But yeah, I've always watched Jaws growing up. The whole Jaws series. I mean, obviously the movies kind of get sillier and sillier as they go along, but the first one's just a phenomenal. It's Spielberg. It really is Spielberg's, I think, best job. I know you guys said this in the podcast, and I made a comment about it, but like the production issues they had in that movie, I thought made him more of a creative director and it made him make decisions he didn't really want to have to make going into it, but I think they worked in his benefit. Like he wanted to show the shark in the first hour of the movie or whatever initially. Then there's such problems with it. But it worked out so well because now one of the things people talk about is, hey, you don't even see the jaw, the actual shark until like over an hour into the movie. And that's like a cool thing. And it really wasn't intended to be that way, but
that's what I was telling Yumper that a real cool documentary that they just put out on Hulu. It's like 50 years Jaws. It shows Spielberg now talking about, and I didn't realize. I mean, I knew there were problems, but lots and lots of problems. To the point where it could have been doomed at any moment. If actually, it really showed me how important editing is. The editor in a movie is just as important as anybody, because if those scenes aren't edited together the way that they are, it could be disaster.
Yeah, and another thing too is just not just the setbacks they had, but like, I mean, even the way Robert Shaw was like acting toward Richard Dreyfuss throughout the whole production, he kind of acted the way like Quint acted towards Hooper. Like he was kind of like that. I mean, Dreyfuss got past it, eventually, but this is weird. It was a weird dynamic. Roy Scheider's awesome. I always like Roy Scheider.
Roy Scheider is awesome.
Roy Scheider guy, and
great Marathon Man.
Yeah, it's a great Marathon Man. Obviously French Connection, all that jazz. He's in 2010, and so yeah, Roy Scheider's pretty awesome. But there's nothing you can say about that movie that's really negative. I mean, Tarantino even said it's probably the most. I don't know if he said it's the best movie ever, but it's the most complete movie ever in regards to like box office appeal, directing, production, like if combined everything together. It's probably the most perfect movie, I think he said.
Yeah.
I don't think it is, but I love it. And I understood what he was saying about it because it was the first real summer like blockbuster, It kind of broke ground for that.
I can appreciate it a lot based upon what you see today. Even now, the movie looks, I'm sure you too, seeing it on the screen twice, it looks just as fresh today as it did when it came out.
Especially when you can remaster things. A movie like that, you can do. It does a lot of justice. And I'm not a big. I'm as critical of a person of Spielberg than anybody I know. But this movie, he really hit a home run on.
All right. Well, that's again what good filmmaking does. And
I mean, it's not as good as Jaws 4. We know that.
Or Jaws 3D when it's like a torpedo like coming into the screen real slowly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, those are heavyweights. This is more of a middleweight, but still, yeah. Because Jaws 4, it got personal. So,
and you got Mario Van Peebles and Michael
Marlon
Caine.
Van Peebles, yes, and a shark in Jamaica for some reason. Yeah.
But all right, let's get to our fifth James Bond entry tonight, which is You Only Live Twice. We've made it to our fifth one, directed by Lewis Gilbert, which happens to be the first of 3 Bond films that he will be directing. I think you mentioned it in the last episode on Thunderball. You said that you felt like this is where it just started to get a little silly.
Yeah, this is kind of the you want to get nuts moment. Let's get nuts. So they started getting nuts with it. And they were able to do it because Bond was huge. And they said, actually, they really wanted to film on Her Majesty's Secret Service first, but scouting the locations and all like the ski locations they had to get, it was just taking too much time. So they decided to kind of film this one, but they're in a hurry to do it. It's the first Bond movie that was 2 years after the previous one. They're now on a 2-year cycle, basically, instead of a 1-year cycle like they were up to Thunderball. But that's because of, like I said, a few production setbacks. Connery at this time wasn't really getting along with the producers, Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli, at all. They even said, like, on the set, he wouldn't even want to be on the set if they were there. It got like that ugly and that bad. And we know how things went with Connery after that, because he ended up leaving the franchise after this. Coming back again, obviously, but he did leave after this because he was just kind of bored and unhappy. And it kind of shows in this film a bit. He doesn't seem quite as engaged as the other ones. But this movie it has some good things about it. It's my least favorite Connery movie. Is it a better movie than Diamonds Are Forever? Probably, like, story-wise, I guess. But like, Diamonds Are Forever is goofier, but like, I just find it a more enjoyable watch than this one. This one was probably the most difficult Bond watch for me, besides like Die Another Day or something like that. And I got all the time in the world to shit on that movie later on, but this one was it's a little more of a tougher watch. Like I said, it wasn't bad. It's like one of your favorite bands. They have 10 albums out. The 10th album you get to listen to and enjoy, but it's the worst of all 10. That type of thing.
Yeah, well, in You Only Live Twice, Bond is dispatched to Japan, which again puts it on a whole different locale than the beach or the water scenes of Thunderball, or what was going on in From Russia with Love. So right off the bat, you are in a different feel. Japanese island to face his perpetrators. And also the first time he comes face to face with Mr. Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
There you go. You got it.
Donald
Right.
Pleasance says so eloquently later on.
But
yeah, he runs into him, and that's a pretty iconic moment in the Bond franchise.
You get started with the intro of the movie. How do you think that intro ranks in other intros?
This is one of the cool things I like of this. The pre-credit sequence I liked in this film, and the soundtrack just kicks ass in this movie. Like that song, like Nancy Sinatra, that song just rips, man. So, and they asked Frank Sinatra, her father, to sing the theme to this, but he turned it down, so she ended up doing it.
Well, that's pretty cool.
But I thought she did a great job. She was very nervous, had to do a bunch of takes, but she ended up nailing it eventually. But that's one of the few great things I would say about this. The strengths about this film is definitely the score and the soundtrack done, and she did a great job with it. And obviously it carried throughout the whole movie. Just the theme itself, not verbally, but the theme itself carries in the movie. So it's pretty cool. I like that.
We got a $9.5 million budget, which goes up about $500,000 more than the last picture. So we are, we are, I mean, that's a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it's Thunderball really set the bar for what they wanted to do when it comes to, like, set pieces and things of that nature. So they had to keep that budget high. I mean, and the thing is, it was the first Bond movie to make less money than its predecessor. That was the first time it ever happened. So that kind of brought it to kind of a crossroads. And then when Connery leaving the franchise, I think they were kind of really worried about a lot of things. But it's the fourth highest grossing Bond film, and so it raked in quite a bit of money. And that year, only the Dirty Dozen made more money that year than You Only Live Twice did. So it was still successful financially, but it was, like I said, it was just the first time that it didn't make as much money as its predecessor. But since the budget was $9.5 million, they could do things with this that they couldn't do with the earlier Bond. The volcano set piece, which Ken Adam, who came back again, did. That just by itself costs as much as Dr. No. The whole film.
I definitely agree with everything that you said. And not only that, but why don't you give us a little background on some of the side characters in this film?
So this is kind of where the weakness, I think, of the film sets in. The side characters aren't terribly compelling. You have your usual suspects. You have Desmond Llewellyn back as Q, Bernard Lee as M, Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. So you have that whole crew. But then you add in some Bond girls who are the Bond girls here. You have two who are Japanese because this movie mostly takes place in Japan, and they weren't really big names, but they were they work for the film. I'd say it's fine for what it was, but there's nothing spectacular that sticks out about them very much. They're the femme fatale in this one, Karen Dor. She played Helga Brandt in this one. It was almost like a copycat character of the Fiona Volpe from Thunderball, even right down to like the red hair and everything. So I don't know kind of why they did that again, but they kind of chose to do it. But yeah, the two girls, Mihama and Akiko Wakabayashi, like they were the main Bond girls. And Mihama was the one who ended up being with him at the end, who actually lasted through the whole movie. And whatever, that's fine. The strength of the villain, I think, is really what carried this movie. Donald Pleasance was kind of the first big actor who was in a Bond film as a villain. Because, if you look at the previous ones who played, Largo, Goldfinger, you had Robert Shaw from Rush with Love, but he was mainly a henchman. And Joseph Wiseman was people knew who he was, like in Dr. No, but like he wasn't really like as big a star as Donald Pleasance. So this is the first time you had a guy like that, which is cool because this is the first time you see Ernst Stavro Blofeld, the leader of Spectre, and you kind of want a big personality playing him. They kind of deviated from that later on. In Diamonds Are Forever, they kind of went backwards with Charles Gray, who was actually in this movie as well as a different character, ended up playing him. But you had Telly Savalas playing once, and then you didn't see him again really until face-wise, you didn't see him again until Spectre, when Christoph Waltz played him. So it was cool seeing Donald Pleasance. I like Donald Pleasance. He's been in a ton of things, and the picture that's up.
This is like 4 years before you get to like after the Great Escape.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty big casting for this movie. I think
it was good. It was a pretty big casting, and they landed a good one. Lewis Gilbert, the director of this one, it's really a weird coincidence because Lewis Gilbert, and he did Alfie with the Michael Caine version of Alfie, mm-hmm. which was later remade with Jude Law. He did that just before this film, and he came on with this, and it didn't deviate. His directing style didn't deviate much from like Guy Hamilton but like this movie, oddly enough, is so similar. plot-wise to The Spy Who Loved Me with Roger Moore, which is my favorite Bond movie. But Lewis Gilbert also directed that one as well, oddly enough. But it didn't have anything to do. He didn't write the story, but he happened to write or direct two movies that are pretty identical. They just used different plot pieces. So, and then he also directed Moonraker, which was also kind of the same story as these as well, but in a different way. So, yeah, it was kind of cool. And Lewis Gilbert, I say directed Alfie before this, Michael Caine. Later on, he did another Michael Caine movie, Educating Rita, but he didn't do a whole lot. But yeah, he did a pretty good job here. He with what he had to work with, it was fine. I liked it. His direction was okay. It didn't take away from the film in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I'm sure, again, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but this has to be the first time that a movie's going 5 times, a 5th movie, and you know what I mean? Like, how many movies had 5 sequels before this movie?
Well, you had
in a successful
the Thin Man series back in the 30s and 40s, probably. You had some comedies that were, I mean, they're mostly comedies though, like series like that. I don't think there's, or like short film type detective stories, but not really besides those, not really a connected franchise like that.
So you could see probably maybe, Connery, how old is Connery at this point? This movie came out in 1967. This puts Connery, he's 37 years old when this comes out.
Yes, so going on 55, obviously. So.
It makes it just say that, you could see maybe how he's getting burnt out, maybe possibly, and wanting to, after this, not do it anymore.
Yeah, the relationship with, like, the deteriorating relationship with Saltzman and Broccoli didn't help at all either, but he was kind of getting bored with it. And he had such an awful time in Japan. They were hounding him everywhere he went. He was just, between the public themselves trying to get a view of him, or the paparazzi or whatever. It was pretty rough.
Now, do you know why they didn't get along?
It was over just creative differences and mainly money. I mean, it was always an issue. Probably every it was an issue the last film with Thunderball too. But I mean, Connery knew he held, and I mentioned this before, he held all the cards here. I mean, he really did, because even people now, like, say, who's James Bond? Well, Sean Connery was real James Bond. Sean Connery this, Sean Connery that. So he really was the driving force behind this, in people's eyes. They didn't look at Ken Adams' production and be like, oh, this is great. Or they look at Ian Fleming's novels going, oh, man, these are such great novels and great stories. They're like, man, Sean Connery's awesome in this role. And that's who they first see. So as he got bored and kind of made his way out, then you started seeing the films themselves make, less and less money and get to almost a breaking point to where, like, the movie I mentioned previously, A Spy Who Loved Me, kind of brought back the franchise to the level that it was previous to this film, or previous to, to like where Goldfinger and Thunderball and those movies were. Otherwise, if Spy Who Loved Me wasn't as successful as it was, this franchise could have died right there after The Man with the Golden Gun. So that's not far into Moore's tenure. This one's weird too, because this was this was Ian Fleming novel, but this is the first time they ever, like, just deviated from the novel, like, almost complete. Like, this is so different. They brought in Roald Dahl, who wrote James and Giant Peach.
Yeah, I was just saying, isn't that him?
They brought him in because, well, he was friends with Ian Fleming. He knew Ian Fleming. They worked together in British intelligence during World War II. Oh. So he wrote the screenplay for this, but, like, radically changed it. And I guess it was a good thing that he did, because apparently the novel, and I haven't read the novel, but, like, it wouldn't have been as good on film as something like this. They needed something with that. You have a $9.5 million budget, which is a crap ton of money back then. You need to have large set pieces. You need to have good special effects. You need to have great gadgets, huge fights and sequences and stuff. So he kind of wrote all that stuff into this film. but he did it kind of quickly. It was kind of rushed, and you can kind of tell. But you know, for what it's worth, I mean, it was okay. He was never asked to come back again and do it. And I'm not crying over it, but that's kind of interesting that Roald Dahl was one of the people that actually wrote a Bond movie, you know?
That's incredible. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's the things that you learn when you're going through this stuff is awesome. That being one of them. Very cool. Very cool fact. You know, and as this movie continues on, you know, there are lots and lots of you know, set pieces, as you said, that are huge in nature. Here's a scene right here I want to play for you.
Remove his helmet.
Just again, him petting that cat is great because, of course, you think of, you know, Austin Powers just a little bit, maybe.
And then this is the movie that Austin Powers probably took the most from. Obviously, Dr. Evil is based off of this version of Ernst Stavro Blofeld with the scar and everything like that. Donald Pleasance in this, he only got about a little more than 10 minutes of screen time in this film. But if you really watch it, he doesn't blink ever during the whole thing.
Really?
You know, he doesn't. It's pretty insane that he was even able to do that, or they edited their way around it. You know, you talk about how important editing is, and I think editing and lighting are two very underrated things in films that people don't really discuss enough. And the editing in this movie was pretty top notch. So it was great to see Donald Pleasance in that character and being able to do what he did and being as menacing as he was, even though, like, you know, the voices you heard previously for Blofeld were much deeper voices played by a different voice actor. So kind of hearing his voice was a kind of a departure from that, but it was cool, you know, like a good villain, very good. The villain the villain in this movie was fantastic. Like I said, he was the strength of this film. This and the soundtrack for sure.
Did you ever see that they actually casted somebody before Donald Pleasance?
No.
His name was Jan Wyrek. If you go online, you can actually see pictures of him playing him, but he did not play a good version of him. So then they fired him and recast Blofeld with Donald Pleasance, which was you know, obviously a better decision, because then you've never even heard of or knew of this other guy, and that would just mean that the movie probably would have only gave you the soundtrack as a positive when you think about it.
I'm laughing at Mike Griffith made a comment about it. The Sean Connery was getting ready for Zardoz.
Oh yeah, yes.
Yeah, he had to leave the franchise to do something like that. That's for sure. Great career move.
But you know, as you stated, not the best of the ones we've discussed so far. But still, you know, raking in $111.6 million is no easy feat. You know, what are some other things that you think are memorable from the movie?
Well, the other things that are memorable, like, honestly, a lot of negative shit, man. But like,
well, let's go through some of the negative stuff.
So, like, the Bond girls, I think, are kind of weak in this film. The movie hasn't really culturally aged very well. So I'm not, you know, it was 1960s. I get it, but even for then, it was like they showed two different sides. Well, first of all, this movie had the fewest locations in any Bond film ever. So you didn't really have it. You had Hong Kong at the beginning, then you had basically Japan. So you saw two different sides of Japanese culture. You saw the kind of the old feudal side of Japanese culture, and then you saw the when he's kind of in the city and he's visiting the basically the Japanese Secret Service agent there. They're basically the M's counterpart. You see more of a modern Japan in the 60s. And when she picks him up and brings him there and all that stuff, he has that great fight scene. It is one of the best fight scenes in Bond movies. When he's fighting that guy who's actually a wrestler. Well, I got something on him later as well. But yeah, when he's in Japan, they're trying to like alter his face and everything to be a Japanese guy. First of all, they failed miserably because you can't turn a Scotsman into a Japanese guy. That's pretty much impossible. And they did a terrible job doing it. And it didn't age well because, like for, obvious reasons nowadays, people don't like that. But even back then, people were kind of like, it's not very good. But and at the beginning of the movie, he's like talking about immediately, he's like, Japanese girls taste differently. I forget, when I watched it, I'm like, fuck is he talking about? Then she's like asking him too, like, what do you mean just taste differently? But it just stuff like that. It's, and it kind of drags through that point when he is integrating himself in the Japanese culture to blend in. First of all, that dude is not going to blend into Japanese culture. Like
no, he's not.
A 6 foot something, Scottish guy who's British in the film, whatever, but it's not going to blend into that culture. So that part of the story, I think, was just real weak. And then throughout the entire like second act, you're just like, good Lord, man, let's get to the climax of this film or get to where it's going. It was a pretty neat. I mean, it's really weird to say, but kind of a neat death of the first Bond girl in the movie, Akiko Wabayashi, or Wabayashi. The way they kind of poisoned her when they meant to kill him, they ended up killing her on accident. But other than that, like that whole portion of the movie, you can just do without. And I'm not surprised that people watch the movie at home where it's like, turn a clicker at that point when that comes on, because you're not missing anything. At least I don't think so. Like I said, the femme fatale, Karen Dor, in this movie wasn't really, she was a direct ripoff of, Fiona Volpe in the last film, and not quite as good. But when it gets to the volcano sequence, he gets to Blofeld, and you see the awesome set piece, the production design by Ken Adam, then you start, that's the best part of the film, which the ending should be. So that's what the movie is still watchable to this day, is for things like that. Most of the stuff that happened prior to that part of the film, besides the great fight sequence I was talking about, was just, I don't know, it's kind of a bunch of just Bond fodder,
The ending was pretty good. How Blofeld escapes.
Yes, of course he escapes, and
yeah.
it was neat having all those ninjas drop into the volcano and fight like that.
Yeah.
So it was a big, gigantic, climactic sequence, which Bond movies would kind of adopt later on. This was the first time they really did that. More so in the Roger Moore films, I'd say that was more commonplace in the later Moore movies. So it did set a kind of a trend a bit. You can't deny that. But I thought like this type of film, Roger Moore is my favorite James Bond. I've said it 1,000 times. He's more suited to playing a movie like this than Sean Connery is. This is more his type of thing.
Gotcha.
And it worked really well in Spy Who Loved Me. It worked well in Moonraker. In this movie, it just wasn't quite, the story itself, it just wasn't quite as compelling, in my opinion.
Let's get to some trivia and some other stuff that you got. What do you got over there?
All right, so the lady in the first scene who he's commenting on how she tastes, which we've already talked about that. Her name is Sai Chin. She actually, and she was only the pre-credit sequence of the film. She wasn't in the rest of the movie. She came back and did Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. She was one of the actually poker players at the table at the end.
Interesting.
So she, kind of came back and to the Bond franchise years later. But I thought that was kind of cool. It's the first time in the Bond franchise. You'll see it more often with we see it a few times with Roger Moore. It's the first time you see Bond in an actual naval uniform, because Bond is actually a commander in the British Navy. He was a commander in the British Navy. And it's the first time you actually see him in a naval uniform in the Bond franchise. This was also, speaking of Casino Royale, this was released the same year as the sort of spoof comedy Casino Royale was. And obviously it did better because the other one, you had David Niven playing the Bond character, like an older Bond, and you had Peter Sellers and Orson Welles, and so it came out the same year that one did. William Sylvester has a cameo in this film, and William Sylvester He plays Dr. Haywood Floyd in 2001.
Oh.
And he has a little cameo in this film too, which I didn't realize until probably a few years ago when I watched it. I'm like, holy shit, that's William Sylvester. He's not in it very long, but he's in it very briefly. Speaking of cameos, Shane Rimmer, if you know who Shane Rimmer is, he is in this film for a brief period of time. He also reappeared in the Bond franchise in The Spy Who Loved Me, also directed by Lewis Gilbert. I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence. He played the U.S. sub-commander in that film towards the end of the movie. That was Shane Rimmer. He was also in Rollerball. You saw him much older in Batman Begins as a guy towards the very end, working for like Gotham City. But Shane Rimmer was, he's been a character actor for a very long time, obviously since the late 60s. And he's been in some really cool films. And he had a little part in this one. Both Bond girls, when I say both Bond girls, I'm not talking about Karen Dora, but I'm talking about Akiko Wakabayashi and Mihama. Coincidentally, it probably wasn't a coincidence, but they were both in the original King Kong versus Godzilla.
Oh. Which
is vastly superior to Godzilla versus Kong. And the last thing I want to mention, I mentioned the fight a while ago he had. And that fight sequence was just absolutely phenomenal, and it's on par with like what I saw with like Robert Shaw, or what I like Lazenby's fight in the hotel room in Auto Magic Secret Service. Like fights like that are very violent, a lot of smash, the cuts, a lot of just quick. But like the guy he fought was named Peter, I think it was Peter Maivia, and that is The Rock's grandfather.
Now that is some crazy trivia right there.
Yes.
Real crazy.
Now the only other person who probably knows that is my brother. But Peter Maivia was actually in that, and I did mention earlier Charles Gray, who played one of the British contacts in this film, Henderson, who you see him kind of get stabbed. You don't really see him get stabbed, but he gets stabbed. And he ends up playing Ernst Stavro Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever, 2 films from now. So he's one of the guy who plays General Gogo in the Roger Moore films from the KGB. He was also in From Russia with Love as a different character. So it's happened a few times in the Bond franchise where you'll see actors play different characters in different films. So, but that was one of them. But that's pretty much all I have for this one. Like I said, it's not the best. It's not a horrible movie. You'll still have a decent time watching it if you can get through the second act. There's some good special effects. Nelly, the gyrocopter, that's kind of a cool gadget. That's kind of a memorable one in this film. There's, like I said, there's a very good fight sequence. The climactic scene in Blofeld's volcanic lair is pretty good. And instead of sharks with laser beams in their head, he actually has real piranha, or supposedly real piranha. And that's just some sinister shit, man. But like way to kill somebody. So yeah, it's worth watching. My least favorite Connery movie, one of my least favorite Bond movies, but it is what it is. We move on from that point.
I thought it was interesting that the volcano set cost almost as much as the whole Dr. No budget. It was so large that it could be seen from 3 miles away. That's pretty.
Ken Adam has been there since the beginning. Even the Japanese Secret Service, like I said, M's counterpart, like his whole office and building and stuff like that. Ken Adam designed all that. It's pretty impressive what he was able to do, and his contributions to the Bond films, especially the whole Connery series, really is undervalued. We talk about things like that, like editing's undervalued. You can talk about cinematography all day, but like you need a guy who's good with production design as well, and you need someone. Oh, and also one thing I wanted to mention too, the main girl Mihama, the Bond girl, was also once again dubbed by Nikki van der Zyl. So she came back again and dubbed another foreign girl's voice. Yeah, so this might have been the last time she did this, so I think it was. So, but up to this point, they're dubbing every, I think a Bond girl got dubbed in pretty much every movie, more than one in most movies. And Nikki Van Der Zyl is the one that dubbed like all of them. So she deserves a spot in Bond Cooperstown.
When we move on to the sixth Bond picture, we can see why Connery doesn't come back, because I guess by the end of this film, if the producers were even on the set, he wasn't going to be there. That's how bad the relationship was.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And also he did the climactic scene, the very end scene of the next movie. Like, Connery didn't think you shouldn't see that set of Bond. So he didn't agree with that, but that he was still going to do the movie. But like I said, the scouting locations out in Switzerland and such became such a hassle that they just said, you know what, we're just going to shelf this right now and then make this movie. So they pushed it through, had a whole new story written real quickly. So, and maybe that's what contributed to this one being kind of a weaker film. But with what they had, what they dealt with, the time constraints, everything, and what was going on with Connery, I mean, they kind of did what you could.
Well, I think we covered a lot of awesome stuff tonight on You Only Live Twice. Any final thoughts?
I'm excited to, like Connery, I'm excited to move on to a different Bond. I'm excited to move on to different types of Bond films, because all up to this point is just they aren't the same story, but it's all very heavy, and even on Imagine Secret Service has Spectre involved, but it's a completely different film. Diamonds Are Forever gets, like I said, it starts getting really zany, and then you get in the Roger Moore movies, which I like, and they're, so it's like this kind of marked. You Only Live Twice kind of marked the end of the Connery Bond films to me. Like, Diamonds Are Forever, is there, but like, he's much older in that film. He looks much older. Mm-hmm. It's batshit crazy, off the wall stuff. It's a good time though. It really is. But this kind of marks the end of Connery's initial main run as James Bond. So it went out with kind of a huge bang. Unfortunately, it was I think it was the weakest one, but what are you gonna do?
When we first met about 3.5 years ago is when I first dug into these, and you just described it greatly, because they all in their own way remind me of why I love Roadhouse a little bit. There's some off the wall zany stuff. It's like you're having a great time. Fists are flying. James Bond's getting the girls, and
it's fun bad.
Yeah, and that's sometimes
it's okay. That's okay. Roger Moore took fun bad to he was great with it, because he was so awesome with it. Those are my favorite ones to watch. Like I said, are they as good as films as the early Connery ones? No, they're not as good as films, but entertainment value wise, which is a lot of times why you watch a James Bond film. You don't watch a James Bond film to watch art, That's true. One of the movies you do. So yeah, but I'm excited to kind of move on, see what Lazenby can do, and see, how things go after this going forward.
All right. Well, my main man, thank you so much again for joining in on this amazing 5th episode of Shakin and Not Stirred. Make sure everyone out there, you check out this Friday. We're going to be back on At the Show. We got a new episode. We're going to be doing 5 and 5 comedy movies. I picked out quite a few from the 80s. That should be pretty good, that we have never talked about. So that should be fun. So tune into that. There should be a new hookup on music maybe tomorrow night. We will see what happens. And we'll see you. I think this new live time slot here is a good thing on Wednesday. So
I like it.
We will.
And if I can, real quick,
please,
if anyone listening or watching, be sure to download the Chirp Radio app and listen to my man, your man, Mike Griffith, who's been in your Hookup a Music show many times. He'll be DJing tonight starting at midnight. And follow him on Twitter, at Kid AIU and see what he has in store. He always puts together some great sets for some overnights. You can always listen to what he does through the Chirp Radio website and the app. So I just wanted to give my man a plug.
And I'll double down on that. I mean, today he sent me a really, really awesome band from Indiana, right over here. Liquids, they were called, a punk rock band. I mean, Friday sent me awesome band, Twin Peaks. Really, really cool music. And honestly, the times that we've hung out, really good guys. So yeah, definitely tune into that radio station, because I have quite a few times. It's always cool too, because you can see the set list of what he plays and dig into that.
If you go to the website, you can see all the set list he plays. The app is very easy to use. You can listen to it like you're listening to a podcast. I listen to his shows while I'm at work. So yeah, support the station, support him. He's a good dude. Play some good music.
Definitely. Thank you so much, everyone out there. We will talk to you guys soon, and everyone else have a good week, and peace out.
Bond. James Bond.